Hi, everyone. I actually don't see how many of you are on the call, but I assume that we'll wait for a couple of minutes for more participants and to join. We're here for the audience, of course, and then I feel that in a couple of minutes we will start. I already see 23 participants. The number is growing. 25. Let's wait until 50. I saw that there were 250 people that confirmed their attendance. So yeah, to make sure that we get at least 50 online. Can everyone hear me well? Actually, Clemens, Peter, Ross, you hear me well?
Absolutely, yes. Thank you, Milda.
Wonderful. All right, so I see participants. Probably there must be something on the maybe to actually start that conversation, to those who have already joined, feel free to give a quick introduction to yourself and why you're maybe here or what excites about the conversation today in the chat function. And so feel free to share that. And yeah, a little bit with no further ado, I want to kick off the conversation today. So this video is being recorded. So for everyone who is cannot see, sorry, I will also stop. We will stop showing non-video participants. So hi, everyone. My name is Milda, and today I'll be your host. I'm the Global Head of Brand and Marketing at Lepaya, a people's capability development partner to various global enterprises. So as Lepaya, we make sure that your people get the right skills at the right time with the use of the right technology to lead productive and happy professional lives. So we work with brands like Microsoft, ING, Freudenberg, and more, which are leading workforce transformation through upskilling their people. So now, while I'm welcoming you all in the audience, of course, I'm even more excited to welcome our panel discussion experts. And I'd like to start that by giving a round of introductions. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Peter Meerman. So Peter is a data scientist, consultant, and business owner with almost 20 years of experience working in L&D. So Peter has helped globally renowned organizations like Accenture, Shell, Philips, and Novartis take learning and development to the next level. His experience and knowledge in the field of L&D spans from strategy to skills-based design, operations, technology, innovations, and analytics. So welcome, Peter. Then I'd like to introduce Ross Stevenson. He's a founder and chief learning strategist at Steal These Thoughts. He's dedicated to transforming learning and development for the modern world. Ross has spent nearly 2 decades helping organizations maximize digital technology to work smarter and build the skills to meet our evolving world. And of course, I really want to welcome our very own head of innovation and AI, Dr. Clemens Lechner, who has dedicated over a decade of academic research on power skills, personality, and values, and publications to record spans of the areas of assessing the statistically modeling skills, uncovering the patterns and drivers of personal development, and identifying the key of academic and professional success. So thank you all for joining this conversation. And before we kickstart the first topic, I would like to encourage all of you to interact, of course, and ask your questions in the chat function, where there are several Lepayans and, of course, our Sylvia Nesrin, our marketing programs team, launching fun polls and, of course, answering your questions. So maybe to start with, I want to say, yeah, the topic of AI and fear of missing out. Hot topic today. As Ross mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, we're trying to stay out of politics, so we'll stay to the meat of L&D and AI. But the first topic that I'd like to kick off with is life with ChatGPT. So now it's almost, a year since ChatGPT has been launched publicly. So I want to throw this question out there. How has your life changed since the AI assistant became available publicly? And maybe Ross, to start with you, how has your life changed? Could you share your experiences?
Yeah, that sounds very serious, doesn't it? I think from a work perspective, there's been a shift there, no doubt. I think for me personally, it's more around surfacing content, the kind of behavior around interaction. So what I mean by that is, the interaction for most digital experiences from an L&D perspective has been a Google search, has been a search across systems in an organization. So it's been, very different kind of since that point to understand how does this work? How can it be useful? How can that be added potentially into a workflow as well? So I think definitely from a working side, look, I think it's undeniable that the transformation there has been huge and will continue to kind of roll on. So yeah, from a work perspective, it's great. From a personal perspective, until it can make my tea or coffee in the morning, I'm not quite all in it on that point. But yeah, I think right now, in terms of how it's changed, I mean, there's lots of application there. There's loads of tools now. So, like many people on this call, I'm kind of joining the matrix and swimming through it to understand what works and what doesn't, right?
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Peter, maybe you could share your experience with 1 year with ChatGPT.
Yeah, sure. Echo a lot of what Ross is saying. I think on a personal level, I am a little bit anxious for my children who are 8 and 10. So I'm trying to figure out as well what all of this will mean for their education, their future, and their future work, in order to prepare them as best as I can. From a work perspective, there's been a kind of a recent shift. I've been mainly involved in using AI for the purpose I think many people are using it right now, which is becoming a bit more efficient in what you do. And I think with some recent developments in ChatGPT, for example, the ability to create your own GPTs, have started to really kind of shift a little bit of the work into seeing how AI can actually replace some of the work that we typically do in L&D. And I think that's a very exciting one. It's also a bit scary. And as with everybody, you try to catch up with as many things as you can on a daily basis. You're trying to think about what this means, long term, short term, and just, as Ross saying, go with the flow as such.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Peter. Clemens, what about yourself?
Well, I've been a daily user of ChatGPT, the interface, essentially from day one. And this is something I've been dreaming of, I think, essentially since I was a child, when I always hoped, well, why don't I have a partner that knows everything, someone that I can ask any question? And I think ChatGPT is becoming essentially that, despite all the problems it still has, and coming up with essentially fake news, despite all the limitations it still has. I think it is really transforming the way that we access and retrieve information. It's becoming more and more useful by the minute, and I'm using it every day. Um, that said, the thing that is much more powerful for me personally in my professional life is the API, because it means that large language models that have been around for much longer than the ChatGPT interface can now actually be used much more easily to build stuff in learning and beyond. And that's what excites me, that we can now build these technologies like GPT, but also other models into our products in learning. And that's what's making the biggest impact on my life. Aside from that, there's a lot of noise that has also impacted my life, because there's all these discussions going on LinkedIn, on conferences, and it's really becoming hard to discern the wheat from the chaff. So that's also keeping me, and I think also the others here in this group, quite busy, explaining AI to people, explaining what the risks and benefits are, and really making sure that we use it in a way that it's not just a gimmick, but a tool that adds value. That's quite a challenge.
100%. So let's talk a bit more about, before we jump into another question, into AI and barriers. I just see that we just launched a poll on AI and barriers to using AI. So maybe you can share, like, what were your primary barriers, or what do you think are primary barriers for people to start exploring their life with ChatGPT and AI assistance? And Ross, maybe you could share. I know that you're sharing a lot about that on your LinkedIn as well, but what would be this one primary barrier that prevents people from effectively using and implementing the use of ChatGPT in their work?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, right? I think the biggest one is probably fear. I think we see a lot of fear. I think, look, biologically, we are programmed as humans to look to survive, not necessarily to look for knowledge in that case. And I think when we see threats, there is usually a decision in, I'm going to find out more about this potential threat and learn maybe what the opportunities are and how to use that. But I think what we see from mainstream media is more focus on doomsday Terminator 2 type scenarios, Skynet's going to happen and take over. So I think, and that's my experience with a lot of companies I work with at the moment. It's literally like, Ross, will I lose my job? Ross, will all these skills go away? And it's very focused in the fear. So I think the biggest barrier for people is just that, genuine curiosity is being clouded by a lot of fear, as in, what does this mean? And I think something I recommend to everyone that I talk with on this is, how can you get to a more balanced point of view? How can you look at, yes, there are risks of anything in life. Life is risk, but how can you look at opportunities as well and kind of bridge those two together? So yeah, for me, the biggest thing has been fear. And I think the best route to allaying that fear is, of course, education in what is this thing, how does it work, and how can it work for me?
100%. And maybe to add, actually, like Peter, and then relating to the same question, it seems like there's two sides of the camp here today. The people that are fearful of like the AI ethics and those that just don't have enough time to use and experiment with AI. So what do you think are the main barriers for people to implement AI into their work?
Well, I'm naturally a positive person. So yes, I think fear sometimes creeps in, especially if you think about wider implication and long term. But I'm still more excited, I would say, rather than fearful of AI and all its possibilities. I actually made a conscious decision myself to set aside time to start experimenting and working and learning what it means, what it can do, where it can add value. And that's not an easy thing. So I do recognize that, the lack of time as one of the challenges. I also think that for us in learning and development, working with a sophisticated technological solution like AI is quite far away from our natural habitat, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, I think the technology itself, the fact that it works a lot with data, which is not necessarily a key part of our existence in L&D, might actually also be a challenge for folks to really understand, what AI is and what it can do, and how, for example, you can use it and maybe potentially even train your own AI models if you would like to. But I also think there's more kind of operational, practical elements. There's things around data security, data privacy. Reliability, of course, is a big question mark still. So as we're all exploring this, I think the mindset of AI being in a state where it gives us clear-cut solutions to problems is, I think, something that we need to set aside a bit. It's a tool, it's helpful, but fortunately, there's still very much a people element involved as well. As you create your prompts, the quality of your prompts and how they impact the output, the data that you put into the model to train it. So I think that's an interesting observation, how AI right now still very much depends on human interaction in the way we use it currently.
Of course. Yeah, and thanks for sharing that. And maybe like then before we jump into the next question, I see that the AI integration challenge is really navigating the ethical dilemmas in AI-based decision making. Clemens, anything that you'd like to share around AI barriers and this ethical dilemma around AI-based decision making before we jump into the next one?
Yes, so I think you have both covered the human side and the organizational and also legal side quite well. As regards the ethical questions, I think this is something that we have to take very, very seriously, and where some questions are just not yet resolved. So there's still legal action going on when it comes to whether it is legitimate at all to just scrape all the data that is on the web, put this into a large language model, and then sell this as a product. It's trained on the knowledge that has been collectively produced by mankind, and the people who have produced the knowledge are not being compensated for it. So this is an ongoing legal question, and it's also an ethical question. But my prediction is that these models are not just going to be shut down for that reason. So we have to assume they are here, and they will continue to be here, and we should make sure that we use them in a way that adds value to whatever humanity thinks it can add value to. So my recommendation is let's start building. In addition to this human and legal and organizational barriers that we've discussed, there's also a technological barrier. Let's be honest, just the ChatGPT interface is not all that helpful. So in order for people to use it more, we also have to remove technological barriers, meaning ChatGPT needs to be much more, and other models as well, have to be much more integrated with the systems of work that people use, say Office, Google, SAP, all sorts of software tools that people use in everyday work. And that is where AI needs to be integrated. We're moving towards that with the GPTs that OpenAI launched, where everyone can build a virtual assistant, but it's not yet there. And that's a technological barrier that keeps people from using ChatGPT, because let's be honest, just text input and output is not all that helpful. You have to do more with it. It has to act. And I can't wait to see that happen more fully. And we're moving in that direction already.
Yeah, especially as it's penetrating the L&D. And just to like, because we do have so much more meat, I want to sort of jump into this one and say, like, there's a section on this whole L&D leaders and their AI challenges. So what are the main challenges that you see these leaders facing today, and why is that such a challenging space to be in right now? And maybe starting with you, Peter, and then we move to Ross regarding this topic.
Yeah, I personally believe that AI will completely transform the way that we learn, whether it's in education or in our work, in professional life. And with that, I also believe that the role of L&D will change. With AI, and I'm echoing what Clemens is saying about the interfaces, and they will come. It's just a matter of time before these more advanced interfaces are coming. And just imagine, you have your personal coach with you every time, and you can just have a chat with it while you're driving or while you're working, and doing so many things to help you, give you continuous feedback, suggests ideas, and maybe areas for improvement, and actually also feed you with knowledge, feed you with exercises that enable you to build certain skills. I think the future is heading in that direction, which for me means that we in L&D really need to think about what then remains our added value once such a kind of personal AI coach or buddy is in full operation. Will we still exist? And if so, why would people come to us rather than their AI buddy? And I think that's a very fundamental question that I would encourage all L&D leaders to start thinking about. But that's fortunately still a few years ahead, I would say. So meanwhile, it's about how can we start understanding how AI can help. And there's different possibilities there. Think about your main challenges that you might have, and explore those. Think about working, collaborating with the rest of the organization you're working in. You might have AI scientists, data scientists in your organization. You might have really smart IT folks who can help you. So it's, I think, a kind of like a two-way approach. One is the long-term play, which is the complete transformation, and then the short-term, the midterm is more about how can we start, working some of that AI right now, so that it helps us to already move in that direction that we want to go in the long term.
Thanks for sharing, Peter. Ross, is there anything that you'd like to add specifically on, what are the main challenges that these L&D leaders will face today?
Yeah, look, I think the main thing I see at the moment, continue to see, definitely been playing around in this space for the last 14 months, is kind of what I go before, it's education. I mean, it's probably a lot of people in this call now that have heard those two little words, AI, every day, and they're thinking, what the hell does that mean? And I think that is the same thing for a lot of us, right? Look, I've been in the tech space for 2 decades with L&D teams, and let's be frank, we're quite slow to adopt and adapt technology, and it's many different reasons why that happens. And we use these words AI, but really what we're talking about is generative AI, which is fundamentally a species of artificial intelligence overall. And we've had AI in our life for a very long time, in our social algorithms, in our algorithms that sit on all of the technology that we use. So a lot of it for me, it just starts off the crux of what we do as L&D people as how do we educate ourselves? How do we get really clear on the bare bone basics of what does this mean? How could it be useful? And how do we do that? And I think to build upon, the points that have already been raised here in terms of there is a lot around I see with leaders who are talking to me at the moment, as in there's a lot of pressure from the business and market expectations on AI, AI, AI. And doesn't necessarily mean AI is the tool that's going to solve all issues, because it's not. It's a tool in the ecosystem of tools that you do have at the moment in time. And there's also a pressure and a challenge that I see as in workforces want to be upskilled with AI tools, and they're looking at their company to do that. And there was research from Boston Consulting Group where they did a survey, I think it was something like 2,000 of their clients, and 86% of people said, we're looking to be upskilled in AI tools by our organization. So you can see the kind of dilemma already. If you've got L&D teams who aren't upskilled with generative AI and what that means and how those tools work and how they can be used, and then you've got a workforce who is saying, I don't want to get left behind. I don't want to be de-skilled. I want to understand how do I work with AI. Then there's obviously a clash there. So those are the big challenges that I see in education on, what is AI? What do I need to know about it? How do I intelligently use it for me as an L&D leader and a team? And then, of course, how do I support my business? Because there's going to be a lot of push from people in workforces who are saying, I am expecting some form of upskilling in how do I use this in my organization. And the funny thing is now a lot of organizations are trying to ban generative AI tools. So we're having this kind of to and fro right now. So yeah, those are the big challenges that I hear about daily from people.
So you mean L&D leaders are already sort of lacking behind, or were always a slower department, so to say, and now they're also expected to upskill their workforce in L&D?
Yeah, 100%. If you're an L&D person historically, if you look over time, we have generally been slow. I mean, this is L&D and HR. We're slow to the party when it comes to most technology, from adopting it and actually adapting it into a workforce. So there's a lot of pressure there. And I definitely understand that pressure as someone that's been a head of L&D for a fast moving tech company, where you've got people at you saying, we need to be implementing this, we need to be bringing this on board. And to be quite frank, as L&D people, you usually aren't the decision makers on what technology comes in. So I think it's quite interesting where we also talk about, a very important topic of ethics and data handling. But in the niche zone of L&D, you are not going to be involved in that conversation, because generally what happens is a company buys technology, you are expected to deploy it and help people learn how to use it versus doing those other components. So yeah, there's definitely difficulty when to Peter's point, naturally, this is not the zone we play in. We're not technology people, we're not keeping up to date on all of the stuff. So to then have the added pressure of, okay, gang, here's this, probably once in a lifetime transformative technology that's now here, go off and spread it in our business and not know how to use it yourself, can be a very, I suppose, siloed and lonely place to be. So I feel for people for sure.
It's a lonely place.
Can I ask, Ross? Sorry
Yeah.
to interrupt, but
Of course.
because I also feel that it's the right moment to really build the partnerships. Like I said, with IT, with whomever is leading the AI department in your organization, because we could take a more facilitating role as positioned in the question as well, right? Because of the fact that this is so new, this is so transformative, that I would feel, it's expecting L&D to take on that full burden is going to be a major challenge.
Yeah, 100%. And I agree with you. It shouldn't be, right? I think, but we all know this. I'm preaching to the choir here. What happens in organizations is that stuff is given to L&D and they're expecting L&D to perform every single role of the organization and deliver this at mass. And to your point, I think it's completely correct. What needs to happen is just like, if you're a leader of a country and you're United Nations, different countries have frameworks to work with each other and make sure they are, focusing on the big things. You look at the same as an organization. So something like this, you would be working with finance, marketing, you would be working with infrastructure teams, information security teams. You would then be building frameworks as in how does this technology work in our organization and how do we do that together? And I think what you find is that really L&D is a player in that field. It is not, to your point, it's not the totality of the burden of doing it all. We probably play maybe 20% in that field of that overall organizational change. Whereas there's all functions in the organization that need to come together. But I'm also a realist in the fact that I know that doesn't happen in corporations because I've sat in them and I've been part of them leading teams. So that is my hopium kind of statement of I wish it was that way. And to your point, I would encourage people to make those relationships. You know, you are as L&D people, you're not going to be here to launch ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot into your organization. You're there to help from a performance support standpoint versus needing to know all the technological ideas behind it.
Yeah, building on what you say, Ross, I would encourage L&D leaders to stand their ground and really consider what they can contribute to the business. The role of an L&D leader is not to implement a technology, because that is really a trap. The technology is there to serve a certain purpose, and the purpose is learning. And what makes people learn and what makes learning work for a business, despite this new technology, has not changed. So in order to apply AI successfully in upskilling and in HR, really we need to get the fundamentals right? So that is exactly the role of L&D leaders in organizations, to bring that domain knowledge to the table. How does learning work? And then select the right tools for that. If AI is the right tool for learning for a specific purpose, great, go with it. And in order to be able to make that decision, you have to have played with AI, you have to have experimented, you have to have something of an overview of what's out there. But really, it's not an end in itself to use AI. It has to be a means to an end. And it's L&D's role to sketch out how we best use it for learning, etc.
100%. And maybe then to jump into the next question, because we'll go into the use of AI. So AI and people's development. So where does AI complement people's capability development, growth, and performance management? And actually would like to start with Ross here a little bit. So where can AI complement, just looking at moving your L&D strategy from 0 to 1 in a place where you are still playing catch up as an L&D leader? Where can you use AI?
I think there's a couple of ways at the moment in time. So obviously Peter spoke about it from GPTs that have just been released through Chat GPT at the moment, where I think what we are looking at is this kind of real dawn of specific AI assistants that focus on specific tasks. So of course we've had automation for a very long time to help us automate tasks, but now we're looking at the kind of next evolution of that in terms of how do we work with these specific assistants to really help us focus on the things that we're really good at, which is the performance consulting, which has been a strategic business advisor, and then using these tools to help us with that. So from an L&D perspective, I'm really encouraged on that. From a personal standpoint, for people's own capability, look, I think I've seen some great use cases with skills coaches already. So being able to decentralize learning in an organization. So, a lot of people have issues with surfacing content to people and making sure it's the right content for them in the context. So personalization in terms of the context that people need for helping to start to learn at least a specific skill. What I'm not saying is give all your skill building to AI, because that's never going to work 100%. You need the human and the technology to work in that. But there is an opportunity where there can be some foundational skill building that's really helpful, and also to accelerate lower skilled workers in organizations and give them access to accelerate their own skill journeys. And we're starting to see that in a lot of data already that's coming out from companies like McKinsey and BCG and Harvard. There's lots of companies reporting already on where they tested this with lower skilled workers and actually how they're able to help them bridge those skills gaps through stuff like skills coaches, surfacing the right data at the right time. I think from that perspective, if L&D teams can really harness that and implement that intelligently, I think that's a really great performance enhancer for people. And like I said, I'm just really excited around the whole AI assistant standpoint in terms of, I think in the next 3 years, definitely, we will look at this as a normal component where we would say, if we need to analyze data in the L&D space, we might go to the, L&D data analyst, which is a AI assistant on a kind of GPT platform that helps us do that to get really specific.
No code required.
Exactly. Now, no code is a beautiful thing, right? Unless you're a coder, of course. If you're a coder, do your own thing. But I think there's a lot of opportunity. So yeah, I'd say that.
100%. And maybe then I actually would like to ask Clemens, because I know that like that's exactly what we do at Lepaya. Like it's really about AI used for skills practice. But so where do you see that AI can be used in like this non-gimmicky way when enhancing people's capabilities, growth, and performance management?
I think what it can do very globally is democratize the sort of learning experiences that were previously reserved to only a few select learners, namely typically experienced leaders, higher management, upper management in organizations. And that's these kind of very highly personalized things that you got from a coach. So you practice something, you get feedback. You get a development plan that is personalized to you. So essentially what Ross mentioned. And I think what we're moving towards is going from learning at a fixed point in time to a combination of learning and really performance support, where in the flow of work, that's always been the holy grail of learning, AI is there to support you. And that's going to be a dramatic shift in how we learn. And so you still need learning, to stock up your skills, but performance support is really, I think, where the field is moving towards, and where AI can best complement human capabilities, simply because of how closely tailored to the individual learner or employee it can be, and because of how scalable it is. You cannot give every learner a buddy that is always there and always on and supports them and is omniscient, knows everything, but AI can get very close to that ideal. And that's, I think, the biggest impact that it will have in the years to come.
Thanks for sharing. Peter, what about yourself? Where does AI complement people here?
Yeah. I always think about it as, many of us know Bloom's technology, but he also wrote another paper on what is the best kind of instructional model, and which is his Two Sigma theorem, where he concluded that one-on-one kind of mentorship, like they used to have, in the old days, is actually the most efficient instructional model. And I think AI has the opportunity to fulfill that promise at scale, because we can't all have our personal coach of flesh and blood. But as most of us are working in a digital environment, we are generating data and manipulating data throughout our days. If that data can be used by AI to be analyzed and to help us with challenges, to provide us with suggestions on development opportunities or career opportunities, I think that's, for me, the ultimate promise of AI. That, I would say all of the above is where AI adds value. And maybe it's slowly time we turn the question around and start asking ourselves the question, where is the role of the human in all of this? And what's kind of left, not to be like doom and gloom talking, but realizing that so many of the things that we currently do in L&D could potentially be covered by such a personal AI coach. What's left, and where can we focus on then maybe the human aspects of personal development and performance?
So that's the question between the L&D leader's role in leading the strategy or leading the facilitation. I guess that's the topic that I would like to throw in there a little bit. So now with AI creeping into the whole people's development, what is then the role of the L&D manager or as a person within this debate and future of AI implementation within the workforce? Ross, maybe a short opinion there.
Yeah, so look, I am a massive optimist on this, just basically because I've spent the last kind of 6 months doing skills research with loads of organizations and looking at data from World Economic Forum, Microsoft, and others. I still believe the future is very human powered. And the reason why that is because if you look at the top 10 skills across, 20 of these reports I've looked at, they are the most human skills we could consider of critical thinking, analytical judgment, emotional intelligence. Technology is beautiful. I'm a digital person. I love it. But there's going to be a lot of stuff in how do we think critically about AI's use? How are we judging the outputs from AI? So it's great that it does all this stuff, but there's still a lot of human components in how we use this stuff intelligently. How do we use our data as humans? Our data is emotions, and we use emotions to interact with our world. And you know, everything is very emotional in what we do. Emotions are attached to every single component of our life. So that is not going to be something that right now these AI tools are able to do. So I still see a great deal as strategic business partners that we will be doing because AI is a tool in that toolkit, and you will still need to think critically. You will still need to have analytical judgment on these outputs, and you will still need to use emotions as your data. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that.
Thanks for sharing, Peter. You showed the slightly less optimistic side that's in the previous answer. What do you think is the role of an L&D?
Yeah, I'm not so sure as Ross. I think in what that we still have a human focused approach. We do a lot of work in learning analytics, and we're actually developing that learning analytics GPT that Ross was referring to earlier. And I also asked ChatGPT, ChatGPT at some point is like having a data analyst sitting next to you. So what would the future look like for data analysts? Whether you're learning or in finance doesn't matter, or marketing or sales, right? And so the answer was that there will still be a place to make sure you ask the right questions, that you critically assess outputs from AI. But I do expect that as AI is becoming more smart, that component, our need to validate outcomes hopefully will reduce and decrease over time. So yeah, I'm not sure. I think there's a couple of things we really need to get in place, which is really build a strong brand as L&D. And if I would be leading an internal L&D organization, I would consider building that brand starting today. Because I do feel that as I said earlier, it's at one point employees might need to make the choice: do I check with my AI buddy or coach, or do I actually enroll myself for a more formal, structured program delivered by the internal L&D organization, or maybe an external partner, right? And really think about the value that you then add to an employee or to an organization, in order for them as well to make the right choice between going for a more AI-based solution versus a more human-based solution. Sounds awful when I say it like that, but I do feel that that will help keeping the human element in all of this as well.
Yeah, Clemens, I'm searching for a middle ground here now, actually.
Yes. So let's assume a world in which AI takes care of, say, 80% of content generation. That is what it is best at: curation, personalization, contextualization. So that is taken care of by AI, and we have AI assisted. Does that guarantee that people are learning? No, because content is not learning. So I think there's a twofold role that L&D departments, even with the best AI, can still play. And one is make sure that people actually engage in learning. Ross said before that the workforce want to be upskilled with AI. Personally, I'm not so sure. I think engagement, motivating people to actually learn, is still a major challenge in many organizations. Because let's be honest, what the organization needs and what the individual employee wants is not always fully aligned. So this is the human element where I think the role of L&D departments can only grow once the other things are taken care of largely by AI. And then there's a second thing, and that's, I believe, it will, AI will free up resources that can help L&D departments elevate their own role to, and I think you said that before, Peter, they elevate their role to a much more strategic partner in the business. where upskilling is not, you deliver programs. Upskilling is for a specific purpose. You want to make an impact on the business. Say you're undergoing a transformation, and the L&D department is very strategic in selecting and prioritizing the right skills for upskilling to make that transformation of the business successful. So I think there's really a role shift that we can experience and that we can expect, that L&D departments become much more strategic and that they take care of what the human element requires, especially of learner engagement.
Yeah, 100%. And then because we started to delving a little bit deeper into like this effective use of AI, what would be the role of an L&D manager? So like this, let's talk about how can L&D leaders determine if and how their team should start using generative AI, and maybe one suggestion from your side of where can the L&D leaders start. Ross, kicking off with you.
Yeah, sure. So I think the simple thing is create a framework around it. Always focus on solving your problems and look at if AI can do that. It doesn't mean AI can always do that. So it is solution first, not tools first. So I'd always go that framework at any point. I think the second bit on I just think just do it, just experiment, play around, even personally, because this is a big skill shift in our world. So even if your organization is not using one of the popular large language models right now, for your own skills as a human in the game of careers, experiment and play with that. But as I say, as a team, you need to be thinking use case and problems first, and then seek a tool and find the right tool for that. Might be AI, might not be.
Oh, thanks, Peter. What about yourself?
Yeah, fully echoing what Ross is saying. Start with your problems first. I think a couple of ideas could be to what I call is kind of targeted experimentation, because it's quite easy to get down the rabbit hole of all the things you can do with AI and all the tools that are available. But it might help to really focus there on the specific challenges or the key challenges that you're facing. Maybe try to divide and conquer. So work together with others in the company, because there might be others looking at similar tools as you are, or addressing similar challenges that you have outside L&D, outside HR. So I definitely would partner up. And I would also look at your providers and your suppliers, right? Your technology, your content providers. I would expect that they would have a decent kind of vision on AI. They might actually have some really interesting things in the pipeline that could already benefit. And maybe it just gives you a couple of ideas about what AI could contribute.
Okay, thanks. Clemens, what about yourself? Because I see also a very interesting question coming after Ross shared. Just to try, but I would like to hear from you, Clemens, first.
For the sake of the debate, I will disagree with the solution first approach. I think solution first is mostly the right strategy, but it can limit you, because if you do not experiment with stuff, then you may not even be aware that there is an AI-based solution for a problem that you have. So if you always go solution first, what you want to achieve, maybe that's not the problem first, actually, that's the better way to put it. That's not always the right strategy. So you want to be playing, you want to be experimenting with AI, and then maybe, because that's how human creativity works, maybe by playing with AI, you come up with a creative use case and you realize, well, wow, we could actually use this and that AI tool for a purpose we haven't thought about. So that's not problem first. It's really technology first, and then the creative use cases spring up. And that's, I think, the space in which we all need to be. We can't put our head in the sand. We need to be playing, experimenting, also make it fun. So I would really work bottom up in an organization and let people try out what they can do with AI, not just with ChatGPT, but also with different tools that are out there that are built upon it. And then be very open to what comes up, and be open to what use cases they find in L&D, but also beyond.
Anything that you'd like to add before we jump into Q&A?
No, it seems like we need to find a balance there then, Clemens, between
I agree.
Problem first, innovation and experimentation versus solution focused. Yeah, no, I think it could work. It's just probably finding that balance might be might be the right way to go.
So I'll jump quickly into Q&A because there's this one question. We're saying that people should stay curious, L&D leaders should stay curious and just test and try. But people are even asking, like, where can we find the tools in apps to test generative AI outside of just ChatGPT, text input output? What's else out? What else is out there? Ross, do you go beyond ChatGPT? What would be your advice?
I mean, there's loads. There's absolutely loads. My best advice to you would be, ChatGPT is not AI, right? It's not the only part of AI that's available. So I will say that for one. Generative AI is a class of technologies, and you've got loads to choose from. So you've got ChatGPT, you've got Claude by Anthropic. If you're a Microsoft user, you've got Copilot by Microsoft. They're all free out there for you to play with. So my best advice would you to be pick one of these tools. Look at the top 4 or 5 right now. Go and pick one and just play with it. Experiment with it. Learn it inside out. Don't do what I see as the kind of downfall of hopping from tool to tool all the time. Go and look at one tool, take time to understand that, find industry specific tools for yourself. So if you're someone that works with video, you might look at Descript or Pictory. If you're working with audio, you might look at 11 Labs. So the easiest thing for you to do, if you're not doing that today, is go create a free account with ChatGPT, go create a free account with Claude, with Copilot from Microsoft, and have a play. Do a Google research, find some prompts, find some basic how-to guides, and rock and roll. That's pretty much it. I'd say, we're probably one of the best times to be alive in terms of barrier to entry and information. So get out there, gang. Grab the ball by the horns and try it out.
Love to hear. Peter, anything that you'd like to add on where can people find these apps and how can they start using?
Well, at one point, I actually simply asked ChatGPT for tools, and it gave me a nice list. But I agree with Ross. Give tools a bit of time. Don't jump too quickly if you think or you hear there's another fancy cool tool out there. Maybe if you want to be a bit more structured, look at the people behind the tool and see what is behind the tool, just to prevent, for example, CEOs leaving all of a sudden on a Friday and coming back on Monday. That's of course a bit of an inside joke here. And think about what you need in your current role, right? So I've actually been experimenting with AI videos. I'm actually going to create my custom avatar as well, because I know that I'll be creating a lot of videos over the next couple of months. So that is something that is a bit of a challenge for me. It takes a lot of time. I think AI can help speed things up and be much more efficient and help me to spend that time then elsewhere and more strategic, as Clemens said earlier. So find something that's close to the work that you're currently doing. And whether that's more text-based or visual, creating images, videos, audio, that's then really kind of depending on your current role, your current needs, and your current challenges.
100%. Yeah, thank you. And Clemens, anything that you'd like to add here?
I fully agree with both of you. And I think I also pasted a link to an aggregator website called there's an AI for that.com that simply collects all sorts of AI tools that are spawning. I think we have to be a bit careful because what's happening right now is that all these tools are popping up. And what we're going to see in the next 1 or 2 years is already a consolidation of the market where many of them are going to die off. And as we always observe in tech products, a few big players will probably be dominant in that space. So I would be very careful in investing too much or getting too attached to a single tool because it may not be around 2 years from now. So as Ross said, don't jump from tool to tool, really find something that works for you and where you think this has potential, this hasn't just launched, maybe there's a bigger player behind it and you can be reasonably sure that it's going to be still around 2 years from now. Because there's costs for you to switching and to trying out too many tools. At the same time as that, strike a balance, look into what's out there. The aggregator website that I posted is maybe a nice portal to get into that world. And then also what has always worked for humans, word of mouth. Speak to people, ask them what they are using, what has worked for them. Maybe ask a colleague to show you how to operate one of these tools and go by what others have found helpful. You don't have to find out yourself necessarily. And there's, of course, thought leaders out there that you can follow on LinkedIn or whatever, that aggregate this huge space a little bit for you as well. And that's what I can recommend. And so subscribe to a few newsletters, follow LinkedIn thought leaders and so forth. The usual suspects, basically.
100%. And I always like to sort of end on a hot take note. So I do have a question for all three of you, of course, and wondering actually what the audience is also thinking. So L&D, leading L&D functions, and FOMO. What's the answer to that? How can we stop feeling this fear of constantly missing out, besides always having that pressure from the business, always trying to like play catch up? What you cannot just put your hand in the sand, as Clemens said. So what would be your one piece of advice? How can we avoid FOMO in our L&D departments? Ross, maybe to start with you.
Just be curious. That's it, really, for me. It's just be curious. There's so many other people doing the same thing. Be curious, dive in, have a play, make your own assessments. That's it, pretty much. You're not going to solve everything, but keep being curious.
But then how do you deal with the gimmicks? Like this sort of the fear of missing out is also a lot about like, let's just apply as much AI and test as much as possible and try to use it everywhere, and everyone has to start using it. Like, how can you avoid that? How can you avoid FOMO, but also make sure that where you use AI is meaningful?
You just need to be, as I say, in your human skills, you need to be more strategic. If you've been around these cycles before with technology, you really think about what is going to be useful. And we've already echoed before, some people might not be old enough, but the dot-com bubble back in the early 2000s, where there was loads of companies doing loads of things, and many of them fell apart, and it turned into 2 or 3 big players. So it's just about being curious, being smart, keeping your ear to the ground for sure. And in terms of the FOMO thing, look, I know it's hard for us as humans, but try not to be swayed by market expectations. Try to, do your own research, do your due diligence, and make your assessments on that. Otherwise, you are just going to be jumping from trend to trend to trend, every single time. And I'm sure many people have experienced that. So I would say, look, try to get clarity, try to be smart about it, and be more strategic. And that's the role of an L&D leader, because you are, I cannot tell you the amount of times in my career I've been peppered with, you need to do this, or you need to do that, or here's the next big thing. We need to be focusing on this now. Your job is to cut through that noise and do that in whichever way possible. So yeah, it's my best answer to that.
Thank you. Clemens, I see that you're smiling.
Yeah, I will say this. Don't try to avoid FOMO because you cannot. Try, get comfortable with the fear of missing out, because the reality is you are missing out. If you have the feeling, it's because you are actually missing out. I've been working with AI for many years. I founded a company using AI, computer vision more specifically, in learning. I try to follow as best as I can, and I cannot keep up because it is evolving at such a pace that no individual person can keep up with all the relevant developments in that space. So my clear recommendation is become comfortable with FOMO, make sure that you follow it enough so that you can judge which of these new AI tools that are and will continue to pop up are relevant and useful to you. And make sure that you have information channels like peers and colleagues and aggregator websites where all this relevant information comes to you, without expecting that you can stay ahead of the game, because you cannot.
Peter.
Yeah, and I think we don't need to be ahead of the game. I think if we're an early follower, it's more than advanced enough. And
Agreed. You are right.
I think to add on that is, and I know that this is really difficult, but try to create space to do, purposeful experimentation and upskilling. Whether you're an L&D leader, talk to your key stakeholders, your businesses, and explain them the situation where we are in, because they are in a similar situation. So I think the timing now is interesting because we're not the only ones struggling with FOMO. I think everybody is struggling with FOMO. So if you explain the story that we might need to, I don't know, stop certain developments or certain programs in order to create space in the organization to adjust, adopt, learn, prepare for the future. And as an individual also, check with your manager and have that similar conversation that in order to really learn and appreciate what AI can do, we, especially in L&D, we know it takes time to learn new skills, right? So let's give us that time, and let's be transparent about it.
Yeah, thank you. I know that there's more questions in chat, but I think that we will actually reply to them maybe in a written format or an email. So we'll make sure to follow up with the panelists and get their insights on the questions in chat. And then I want to thank everyone and on those who joined, and of course the panelists for sharing their experiences. It was wonderful to hear of what the role could be, and actually see that there is a lively debate around this. And I think there is no one answer. As long as we stay curious, as long as we take that time to explore, the future seems really, really bright for the L&D and people's leaders in space. So thank you for joining, everyone. Really hope to share more with you in the very, very near future. And let's hope that we can see these panelists in the near future as well on one of Lepaya talks. So thank you, everyone. And thanks to the panelists, and take care.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Bye.